Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SAIEE corporate partner SALTO Systems' webinar today on wired and wireless access control fundamentals. Before we start, a few webinar considerations. Attendees are reminded to ensure the volume is turned up on their device. Ensure you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure the streaming and audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the questions panel located within the GoToWebinar control panel. By default, this control panel is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The chat function is reserved for webinar organizers and panelists to communicate with attendees. Attendees will not be able to chat with each other, however, are encouraged to ask questions. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the SAIEE YouTube channel under the Corporate Partnership playlist. This channel is updated regularly, so ensure you check back as often as possible and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The link to subscribe is in the chat box at the moment. A certificate of attendance will be issued a few weeks after this webinar, once we have received the CPD validation from EXA. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Mr. Roger Birch, who's a technical lead for SALTO System Africa. With a combined experience of 16 years in access control, Roger worked for some of the largest access control manufacturers in South Africa, joining SALTO Systems SA in 2015 as their technical lead for Sub-Sahara Africa. He has extensive knowledge in solution consulting, training, technical writing, and technical support across verticals such as education, mining, retail, corporate, healthcare, and shared living and working environments utilizing on-premise, mobile, and cloud-based solutions. I hand you now over to Roger.
Thank you for that introduction, Minx, and welcome everyone to this brief presentation of who SALTO is and some of the world-class access control solutions we provide over a vast range of verticals and markets in today's world. So we are an electronic access control manufacturer based in the small town of San Sebastian in Spain, where we manufacture all of our access control solutions in-house. We have SALTO offices in over 30 countries around the world, but we have a footprint in over 90 countries. And this is made possible by our IBPs, or Inspired Business Partner Network, around the world that supply, install, and support these solutions in their own respective countries. So our smart access control solutions, they are maintenance-free, they are wire-free, and they are wireless. And they're compatible with almost any type of existing lock standard available around the world today. Our platforms, be it cloud-based or on-premise, will give you the ability to manage and control your access of your business and multi-site businesses from anywhere in the world using your smartphone or any web-enabled device. So inspiration, dedication, and passion have led SALTO to become the 5th largest access control manufacturer in the world in a little over 10 years. Our production facility is fully automated using the just-in-time order system and also manufacturing according to an order or a specific project. And we have the capacity of manufacturing around 750,000 units on an annual basis. Okay, so just to run through a couple of references that we've installed or that we've provided a SALTO solution for, you'll see that we do have a very good fit in the education sector with solutions at some of the biggest, most prestigious universities in the world. Just to make a mention there, we've got Stellenbosch University in South Africa, but we also do work with UWC, Cape Town Peninsula University of Technology, as well as the Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth. So there you can see there's a couple of transport references, a couple of airports, and then we also do work in the commercial vertical as well. with larger corporate buildings. So a couple of government installations there. Obviously, these are not in SA. A couple of parliament buildings that we've secured with SALTO. And then we've also got a good fit in the healthcare sector. So currently I do make mention there of Netcare Green Acres Hospital, where we are providing them a solution for them to secure their drug cabinets per patient, so that you know, in the past it's been a bit of an issue that these things go missing. They now secure these cabinets with SALTO locks, so that they have an audit trail of who opened the lock, when they opened it, and also ensure that only people that have access can access those drug cabinets. All right, and then also obviously in the hospitality sector, we've grown exponentially in that vertical, with a couple of reference sites like the Leonardo, the Saxon Hotel, but not limited to. We are also a preferred vendor for the Hilton Group worldwide, and you will see a lot of our access control devices should you go visit the Hilton around the world. Another vertical or another sector that has become quite popular and more prevalent these days is your shared working spaces and shared living spaces. Specifically the first one I've got there is Regis. So Regis is a company that sells temporary working spaces on a weekly, daily, monthly, yearly basis. And it's just made their key management and their access to meeting rooms and things so much easier, that they can just you know, book a room for a person. They get sent a digital key to their mobile device, and then they're able to access that door when they should. And then also a couple of installations in the retail sector, as well as a couple of large banking institutions. And once again, these are all international institutions. Okay, so smart access control. So let's take a look at some of these smart devices and the doors that they are able to secure. So we've got a range of electronic door handles, or escutcheons as we refer to them, that can replace your existing standard lock and key scenario using the existing mortise lock that is actually sitting inside the door. So basically this is just a bolt on to your existing lock that sits inside the door. You'll see in the middle there we've got electronic cylinders. These cylinders are it's a very quick and easy way to secure a door that used to use the mechanical key type of a lock, like a cylinder. And to install this, you simply remove the existing cylinder and then replace it with a SALTO electronic cylinder. And this can be done in under 5 minutes. So it's a really quick installation. And then to the right of that, you'll see that we also have hardwired readers and peripherals connected to controllers that give you the ability to manage sliding gates and boom gates, and do lift control to certain floors, and also long range vehicle access options as well. So these devices, these wall readers, they are both Bluetooth and NFC, and they are able to be accessed by the user's smartphone, as opposed to a physical credential like a card or a key fob or a tag or something like that. Okay, so the first device that we're going to take a look at there is the XS4 escutcheon. And this escutcheon, or this handle, can either be standalone or it can be wireless online. So these are battery operated locks. They run on 3 AAA batteries, and they have a lifespan of around 40 to 50,000 openings per set of batteries. And this brings down the cost of maintenance down, you know, considerably. As an example, if you had to have a standard conventional access control system where you have a mag lock and you have the no touch exit and you have a request to exit button with a controller and all of the rest of it, you need a power supply to supply power to these units in case Eskom decide to cut the electricity. So as an example, a 12 volt 7 amp power supply with a 12 volt 3 amp battery, just the power usage on that running on the Eskom tariffs is definitely going to cost you more in a year than what a set of 40 Rand, 340 Rand AAA batteries will be once a year. So keeping in mind that, you know, even eventually those 12-volt batteries also need to be replaced either annually or biannually, and this often comes at a considerable cost. So the difference here is that when the power fails on the conventional systems, the doors can only stay locked or powered up for the amount of time that the battery backup gives power to the system. With the SALTO escutcheons and the cylinders, the door will stay locked even after the batteries have run completely flat. Okay, so the next device we're going to take a look at there is the XS4 Mini. Typically, this lock is used for indoor use, places like offices, shared living or co-working spaces, and have a very minimalistic design in what it is. It's got the same battery usage performance as the XS4 One that we looked at previously, but it's just in a more compact design. So these locks are also available in offline and in wireless online, with mobile and card options for this lock, the same as for the XS4 One. All right, so the first lock that you can see there on the left-hand side, this is our classic XS4 original range. And you'll see then right next to that is our glass door solution. So this is perfect for if you're trying to control access to a frameless glass-on-glass type of a door without having to install the unsightly wiring and the trunking and the magnetic locks, keeping the aesthetics of the door. So we also then do have a panic bar solution, which you can see to the right of that. The emergency exit or the panic bar solutions, we actually increase the ability of those exit devices or those fire escapes. Now, we don't manufacture the panic bar itself, but we retrofit to over 40 different panic bar manufacturers worldwide. So it is possible to retrofit an existing emergency exit door. And I'm going to explain the benefits thereof a little bit later. Okay, then to the right of that, you can see we have a keypad escutcheon. So the keypad escutcheon is typically for a higher level of security where you need dual authentication or multi-authentication. So that would require you to maybe present your mobile device as a key and enter a PIN code, or use a card and a PIN code. And that's just to beef up the security, and it's a little bit more secure to validate that access point for a user. Okay, so adding SALTO to an existing panic device or emergency exit gives you the ability to now monitor this door state wirelessly. So if the door's been left open, it will wirelessly send the door state through to the software so that the operator will see that the door has been left open. But it will also be able to perform emergency open modes. So in case of a fire, these doors can be accessed from the outside as well. So typically, you know, a fire door has got a push bar on the inside, and it's pretty much dumb from the outside. Okay, so you'd only be able to exit, but in the case of emergency, if this is linked to a fire panel and the fire alarm is triggered, we can then send a wireless signal to all of the wireless doors to unlock themselves so that the fire department or whoever the emergency team can access the site from the outside. Okay, so our cylinder range, these cylinders are very versatile and have many applications, from server rack solutions, key switches to drive roller shutter doors, securing cabinets, and then we also have a very robust wireless padlock that can be used either as a wireless online or a standalone device. Now, even in this event where it is seen as a standalone device, if a user accesses that lock with his mobile device, because the lock has got two-way communication, this lock can be sitting in you know, a really far off place where there's no power, no network, and when the user actually goes and scans or opens the lock with his mobile device, it will send that time and date transaction as well as the battery status of that lock using a small bit of data on his phone. It will send that back to the software. So you'll basically have real-time transactions coming from that lock, even though there's no power or network infrastructure close by. Okay, so our hardwired readers, and these hardwired readers you typically find at places like, you know, boom gates on the goosenecks or at a front entrance or something like that. But these readers are IP65 pitted readers, so they are waterproof, and they come either with or without a keypad. They are both Bluetooth and NFC enabled, meaning that you can comfortably control, for instance, a sliding gate or a boom gate at a distance without having to roll down your window to present a tag to the reader or anything like that. So another option for vehicle access is then the UHF reader or the long distance reader, which is right next to it. And this can either read a sticker that you can place on your vehicle's windscreen, or we've got a UHF dual technology tag that is UHF and MyFair. And these readers, I mean, I can be sitting in the car with the card in my pocket and it will be able to actually read that card in my pocket. Right, and then we've also, right next to that, you'll see those are our XS4 controllers. These are obviously online controllers, but they can be run offline as well, so that you can control, you know, for instance, a vehicle barrier or a turnstile that has no network connection. Or maybe if you're doing lift control, you can run a total of 128 floors in an elevator control application without the need of running a network cable to the controller. And this is often, I mean, obviously the lift carts are moving up and down. It becomes quite a challenge. So I think the offline controller is a very neat solution for lift control. All right, then we also offer a solution for lockers. So these are our XS4 locker locks, but they're not limited to only locker doors. So you can use these on drawers, cupboards, cabinets. But if you are using this in a locker kind of an environment, there's a really neat feature in the software which is called free assignment, which allows anybody to use any locker at any time, given the locker is open when they get there. So for instance, if you've got a bank of, let's say, you know, 50 lockers, you can then secure your goods inside that locker and lock it with your mobile device. From that point on, only you will be able to unlock that locker. Once you've unlocked it and you've removed all of your goodies out of the locker, you can the next person can then use that very same locker, and then once the same thing then applies, only they will be able to use that locker going forward. So this takes out the locker management where you don't assign a static locker to a person, and nobody actually needs to go and manage those 50 lockers. It will work on a first come first served basis, and you can pick any locker that's available. So with these lockers as well, this unit also comes by default with a technology called biocoat. It's a coating that is burnt into the plastic, and this is an antimicrobial coating that uses silver ion nanotechnology for the control of spread of bacteria and diseases on the lock itself. So at SALTO, we are also committed to environmental sustainability, not only in our design and manufacture, but also in the energy usage and the real-time monitoring of the battery life of our products. And this increases the time between having to change batteries and getting the best life out of those batteries as possible. Okay, so that's it for the introduction. Thanks for joining, and I hope you found this information informative, and that you have a better foundation for the webinar to follow, where we're going to be diving deeper into wired and wireless access control fundamentals. I'd also like to ask you to please turn up your volume slightly. This is a pre-recorded webinar, so the sound might be slightly muffled. that area or door, and often who actually still has a key for it. Okay, so we're going to take a look then at the use of our logical access control system. So the goal of the access control in a logical system is to minimize the risk of unauthorized access to these systems. Now, most organizations have infrastructure and procedures that limit access to networks, computer systems, applications, files and sensitive data that you may have, such as personally identifiable information and intellectual property for the company. Now, there is an act in South Africa that exists, which is the POPI Act. It's the Protection of Personal Information. And then you also do have the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And the terms and conditions of both of these acts impact technology and processes and the way in which employee and client information is stored and safeguarded. Now, should the security measures in place be breached and personal or company information is stolen or leaked, the institution may be held liable as well as face the possibility of hefty fines. Now, in both your physical and logical access control, the rules and laws of the protection of personal information applies to both of them. Okay, so with your physical and logical access control systems, there is a possibility to integrate them. And the question you may ask is, well, are there any benefits in integrating systems like this? So the integration of your physical and logical security provides the benefit of simplifying the user management while increasing the security. So it also then ensures that any changes to a user's profile are updated in all the other systems without any delays. Now, data integrity is a critical requirement for any organization, especially with numerous departments all sharing data or adding data to a shared platform. For instance, should I add a new user to the physical access control system and his details differ from what I have for that user on the HR or the payroll system? When sharing this data on these platforms, there may be a mismatch leading to, for example, non-payment of a user's hours worked because the ID number or the employee number that is sent to the HR system from the access control system don't match the employee's details. Now, in the case of an integrated system, security is often managed by the IT staff, with the benefit of reducing a requirement for an extra staff member to manage the access control systems. Integration also has the benefit of increasing security, such as restricting logical access to software platforms, shared drives and servers, if no physical access has been granted. So in an access control scenario, I will not be able to use my credentials to log on to a server or a shared folder unless I've gone through the main gate access control point and I am seen as being on site. Okay. All right, so before we take a look at the different solutions or options out there, keeping in mind that there are various factors to take into account before deciding on a solution, let's just first look at the different options for granting access in any integrated type of environment where we've got the physical and logical access control systems. Okay, so our access control models that we use will determine how someone will grant the right level of permissions to an individual so that they can perform their daily duties. And this is whether it be physical or logical, either or. So your access control models define how permissions are assigned. So the first one we'll take a look at there is mandatory access control. And in the mandatory access control, only the system owner manages the access control for a user. The end user has no control over any of their privileges that they've been assigned. Then we've got a role-based access control. which provides access based on the position that an individual has in an organization. So an example of this is obviously if you've got a data capture clerk, they will have very limited access to a system, or they will have very limited physical access to the site, as opposed to a GM or a CEO or something like that. Then we've got a rule-based access control, which is dynamically assigned roles to users based on the criteria defined by an owner or a systems administrator. And then obviously we've got the least restrictive model, which is discretionary access control, which allows individuals complete control over anything they might own or have access to. Okay, so before deciding on the physical access control solution, or before determining what type of a system is best for your business, there are 8 fundamental questions you need to cover to distinguish this. Okay, so the first one there, are there benefits and is it actually worth the cost? So many businesses and institutions see access control as a bit of a grudge purchase, but at the end of the day, if this is correctly configured and deployed, access control systems can not only eliminate your external risks and threats, but can also improve the efficiency and employee accountability, with the costing of these systems dependent on the level of security that you need for the site. Okay, so the burning question, what do you secure? Now, in most institutions, there are areas that are more sensitive than others, and that may contain important private information, valuables or items, stock and machinery, as well as general security to ensure employee and employer well-being and safety. Now, typically on a site, your internal doors are not seen as essential to control, and more often focus is aimed at the perimeter to address the direct threat coming from outside of the property. Well, that and the fact that controlling each and every door within the institution is often very costly. Now, with the arrival of your wireless, wire-free, battery-operated locks and the cost saving that they bring, with the ability to run online, semi-online, it now gives you the option to secure most of the doors to ensure all-round security, or where that security is most needed. Now, in the era of shared space rentals that are becoming more prevalent in today's times, there is a requirement emerging to be able to secure more individual spaces, meaning more doors at a higher cost, and this is obviously to the detriment of the building owner or the service provider. But at the end of the day, it is their responsibility to ensure the safety and security of tenants and their belongings. So a mitigation of risk factor for each area has to be taken into account when deciding which doors to control and which doors and areas not to. Okay, so the next one we've got there is what forms of authentication and how many do we need? So we explained authentication a little bit earlier on, and there are numerous authentication methods that can be used in access control. And factors that will determine this are things like the convenience, the security of that credential that you're planning to use, the ability of it or the capacity, and then the accuracy and the level of authentication that it provides. Okay, so some options to consider are things like your card technology that is used, bearing in mind that there are more secure solutions than others, but they do, however, come at a higher cost, and you've also got to take into account that this is also a recurring cost to the business. Okay, so a couple of forms of these credentials are things like smart cards and key fobs, and then you can also get various wearables in bracelet form and silicon rubber bracelets and things like that. Now, in combination, multiple credentials can be used for a multi-factor authentication, and that increases the security level. So we will take a little look at this a little bit later on, and I'll give you an example of what the multi-factor authentication entails. Okay, so what kind of a reader should you use? Now, normally this isn't really an issue, but obviously in your guys' line of work, where everything gives to the aesthetics of the building and the door, this is definitely a factor that you would be thinking of. So, what kind of a reader should you use? Now, all depending on the access point, where it's located, and what it needs to do. So, for example, to drive a magnetic lock, or to send a contact to a controller to open a gate, or if it's a fire escape. So all of these things will determine the type of reader that you would need to facilitate the desired outcome for that access point. For things that need a relay or a contact, you would need a wall reader and a controller-based solution, or a wired solution. And for standard doors, your internal doors and office doors and things like that, you could use something like an escutcheon handle, electronic handle. And for gates and server racks and cupboards and drawers and things like that, you then often need to replace the existing cylinder that's within that door. Okay, so all depending on the door you want to secure, and if you are using the existing locking mechanism inside that door, these are all factors that will determine the reader type and the functions that it's able to provide you. Okay, so another question to be asked is what kind of a lock should you use? So the lock referred to here is actually the locking mechanism that's used to keep the door or access point locked. Now, these can either be electronic or mechanical. Okay, so the electronic locks can either be a magnetic lock, a strike type lock that you would see in the door frame, or an electronic deadbolt. But these locks often need continuous power to keep the lock working. So when you look at a mechanical lock, or a mortise lock as it's commonly known, these locks don't use any kind of electricity and normally requires human intervention to lock and unlock the device. So your mortise locks work with either a latch or a deadbolt, or a combination of both. And typically these types of mortise locks and things are found inside the door, cupboards and gates and things like that. Okay, so another question is, what do you need at the door besides a reader and a lock? Because I mean, this is often what is seen by anybody else. They see a reader and well, sometimes they don't see the lock at all. So basically all they see is the reader. But once again, this all depends on the door itself and on the construction thereof. But typically there are many other elements needed for access control points, a wired access control point like this, than normally meets the eye. So these things are often hidden for one good reason, that they're often very unsightly and it affects the aesthetics of the door. So we're going to take a look at a couple of these examples a little bit later on as well. Okay, so how do we then connect the reader to the network? So herein lies the big difference of a wired and a wireless system. It's the way that they connect to the network, or to access the network, or the access control software from the door itself. And we'll take a look at a couple of examples later. Right, and then you've also got the question, what type of an access control management system should you use? Should you use a local system that is an on-premise solution, or a cloud-based solution? So, and here too, there's vast benefits for both, and they have both of them have a very different in the aspect of the management of a system like that and the maintenance involved in a system like that. Okay, so let's compare it a little bit, and we're going to do a comparison between a wired system and a wireless system, just so that we've got a very good idea of the difference between the two. Okay, so a wired or hardwired system, and typically we refer to this as your conventional access control system. There are many of these systems out there and they work pretty much the same. Okay, so these conventional access control systems they've been around for a very long time and have been the only real option that we've had to key replacement in the past. So these systems are, however, sometimes very difficult to install and retrofit to existing doors, as cable runs are often needed to be hidden within the door frame, or they require network or power infrastructure. So often these things are provided by a third party that is obviously certified to carry out this type of work. So depending on where the door is situated, you would always need a power point or a network point at those doors. Now, there are also limitations to the types of doors that you can secure this way, as the locking mechanisms associated with these wired systems are generally bulky, and you do require, like I said, you do require a network or power source very nearby. So, like with the newer generation of wireless systems, wired systems can still be remotely controlled, allowing the user to log into an app from a mobile phone, tablet, or a PC. So this then provides you real-time information about who's entering which location and when, and also who's been denied access. So you can do this all without having to set a foot in the building. So this does, however, require some form of a VPN or a local network that you need to access to be able to access the database remotely, unlike a cloud-based system where you can just connect to the system remotely into a cloud server. Okay, so since these systems are wired and they are powered externally, they are sometimes prone to loss of power and a surge in power. And I think as South Africans, we know both of these scenarios all too well, the no power and too much power at times. Okay, so just looking at the diagram that I've got there, you will see there are additional elements needed to secure a wired door other than just the reader and controller. And you're looking at things like your power supply. Generally a door like that, because of health and safety regulations, on the inside of the door, you will require an emergency break glass. You need things like, the conduit, the cabling that you have to hide within the conduit to make it nice and neat, network point, power supply, all of these things. You need additional to the wall reader and the controller. And they also come at an additional cost as well. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a bit of a cost comparison from a wireless to a wired system as well, just to give you an idea of how that affects the pricing at the end of the day. Okay, so this diagram is showing you what a wireless system looks like. So your wireless systems are proving to work with pretty much any or most of today's access control systems. So it's no surprise that they're quickly becoming an attractive alternative to our traditional hardwired solutions. So there are benefits for both your integrators or your installers and the end user. From the end user standpoint, wireless access control systems deliver the same kind of benefits as wired ones without the cost of the hardwiring of the system and the trunking and everything else that goes with it. And for the integrator or the installer, that means much less time spent on site doing this installation. Okay, wireless readers are also not limited to only secure doors, as wireless solutions exist for exit devices, gates, elevators, padlocks, data or server cabinets, and even gym lockers. So you can see on my little diagram, I've got a couple of door handles, and then I also got a couple of cylinder locks as well. So the cylinders, basically, it's a European profile. Anywhere where you've got a cylinder like that, you can basically fit an electronic lock. And fitting one of these things takes you less than 5 minutes, and the access control is secured on that door.
Okay, so there is a significant cost saving also on a wireless system in not only the hardware aspect, because there is a cost saving on the hardware itself, but also from an installation time, with options of using the existing mortise lock that's inside the door. So that means that you only basically replace the door handle, and then you can install a wireless access point for communication between the door handle and the software, and that is no more difficult or time consuming than plugging in a standard wireless router or access point. It's really easy to install. Those devices are generally PoE, so they get their power from the network cable. So basically, you don't need IT or network infrastructure right at the door. You basically just plug that gateway in on a cable and run that all the way to the switch. Okay. What's nice about a system like that is that instead of using one IP address for a controller that controls maybe 2 doors, this device or this gateway device, you can run a total of 112 doors online, fully online and live, off of one IP address. Okay, right. So let's take a look at a commercial comparison between the two. So the first example that we have there is a hardwired system, and this requires a little bit more than just a reader and a lock. So as you can see there, all of these additional elements are needed to make a solution like this work. So these are all the things that I just mentioned before. And then also just to keep in mind that, you know, with an installation of a door like this, there are some elements that are out of your control as an installer. Things like the power and the network that is needed for those points. You know, 90% of the time, this is something that is outsourced, and the installation of this project would depend on the installation of their access points and their power points. Okay, so taking a look at the costing, I put a costing in there of around 13,000 for a door. I feel this is still a very, very low price. They go anything between 13 and 15 Rand. Also, obviously, depending on all of the additional hardware that you need. And then the installation time of a door like this is normally about 3 to 4 hours. Okay. So if we go and compare that with a wireless access control system, we get exactly the same type of functionality from the wireless door as what we get from the hardwired door, except you can see there's a huge cost saving, firstly, in the hardware itself, and the installation time. There's a huge cost saving, especially when you are retrofitting something like this to a door. Let's say, for instance, the handle that you see there. If you should retrofit this to an existing door that already has a mortise lock inside, it's probably a 10-minute installation, and the access point that you see right above it, or the gateway, that's a matter of plugging it into a network port and off you go. So there's a huge cost saving on the installation time of a solution like this. Now, with that cost saving that you can see there, obviously, either you can save the client or the customer costs per door cost, or you can, for the same spend as what they would have for the wired system, you can offer them an additional door. And even with doing that and increasing the installation time of something like that, you can see there's still a huge cost saving, and there's still a huge installation time saving that you would be able to get from a wired solution, a wireless solution, other than a wired solution. Okay, so if everybody's got an understanding of how wireless works. So simply stated, a wireless system is a platform which allows system data to transmit back to the main panel over wireless signals instead of transmitting over a hardwired installation. Okay, so a wireless solution between access control points that uses wireless access points must be bidirectional, which means more stringent requirements for throughput, latency, and encryption. So we're a wired solution for the peripheral device that include maybe a request to exit device, a door position switch, and a card reader that's wired to a controller is usually unidirectional, okay? Meaning that they only send a short momentary signal when a credential is presented at the reader. So a wireless solution is encrypted and secured between the reader and the wireless network, as well as between the door and the user's credential. So wireless access control technologies are often categorized by the frequency band that they use. So today, access control systems predominantly reside on that 2.4 gigahertz or 900 megahertz bands. Many manufacturers offer their own variation within these broad radio frequency categories, making for a highly diverse selection of individual technologies that you can choose from. So, for example, some offer an alternative version of open architecture, secure Wi-Fi based wireless electronic access control in that 2.4 gigahertz range. And where others then offer a open or proprietary Bluetooth or Zigbee based technology in that 2.4 gigahertz range. Now, as these communication protocols have evolved over time, there has been a new surge towards using Bluetooth with a frequency range of around 2,400 to 2,480 megahertz, secured with AES 128 or AES 256-bit encryption. And this is the security factor added to those locks. Okay, so 256 is a very high, it's almost a military grade of encryption. And the locks themselves also communicate on a wireless radio frequency based on low energy Bluetooth. So wireless access solutions can generally also be installed and deployed in much less time than the traditional wired offerings. And they give the same type of functionality as your hardwired systems. Now, with the locks and their ability to do bidirectional communication, access rights can actually be stored on the user credential itself. So this would then protect it from a network or a power failure, and it also eliminates the need to store these rights within the lock's memory. So should the lock then at any time lose communication with the wireless network, they simply write those offline transactions to the credential that the user is using, whether it's a card or a phone or a tag or whatever it is, as opposed to being reliant on the network to carry the data to and from the server. So this concept is called data on card. And this concept has been proven to be reliable at transferring transactions back to the software in instances where redundancy is of the utmost importance in the event of a power or a network failure. Okay, so but with that said, there is still often great concern about the risk of transmitting data wirelessly. However, there's been tremendous efforts to protect against these dangers. So wireless electronic access control technologies of today are highly secure. And like I said previously, they're capable of using 128 or 256-bit encryption for the protection of the data. And this is all based on the user or the institution's needs. I mean, you don't have to go that high a security rating, but obviously for more sensitive places than others, you would need to take a look at the technology in the card that you're using or the credential. Okay, so wireless versus cloud and mobile. Now, wireless is very different from cloud. Okay, so wireless, like we said previously, wireless is simply a form of communication from one device to another, while your cloud is referring to the ability to manage, configure, update systems remotely from any kind of a device. And this is a hosted solution. Okay, so mobile is all about managing, configuring, and using the system from a smartphone or a similar mobile device. So mobile apps for access control systems might communicate over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but this type is not what we're talking about when we refer to a wireless system. Okay. Now, while wireless, cloud, and mobile all offer many of the same benefits, they are used in very different ways. So wireless typically refers to the access control devices connecting to the host system themselves. Okay, so that's when we talk about wireless. Cloud-based services allow you to store data on servers owned and maintained by third-party companies. So rather than having that you assume the responsibility for the costs and the maintenance and the on-site support and antivirus softwares, updates and backups and things like that. Your cloud services can be very beneficial to both your integrators, once again, and your end users, especially when it comes to the need for costly infrastructure. So you'll see there with the slide right in the middle, the picture in the middle, we've got our wireless locks. They're connecting to an access point, and that is sending that information to the cloud server. So nowhere in that whole installation over there do we need to require any kind of a network. So you're able to either use your existing network, or you can use a wireless signal or a 3G signal for that device to send your data to the cloud server. So you really don't need a lot of infrastructure for a type of a device like that. The very first picture, this is a wireless system, but the wireless data that it's capturing at that access point is actually sending it to a server. So you're still going to need network infrastructure. You're going to need a server that resides somewhere in that area or in that site with a database that's on that server. Okay, so that's the difference between wireless, cloud, and mobile. And then we also have another version of mobile. So mobile can also include the use of a smartphone as a credential, or the use of a phone to commission access control locks in the field. But more commonly, it is referred to using the mobile as a credential to be able to open a door and use it for access control. Now, all three of these technologies do make access control a lot easier and also more affordable and scalable at the end of the day. Now, with the wireless locks, there is also an offline mode that you can use these locks in, and we refer to this as data on card. So this platform actually allows you to use your offline standalone locks to read, receive, and write information from a encrypted, secure data on card system that utilizes the capabilities of RFID's read and write technology. Okay, so with this kind of a platform, all of the access data is stored and distributed by its operating smart card. So whatever type of a credential that person has, this is how we transfer the data to and from our system, to the locks and back to the system again. Okay, so when presenting a smart card to a offline standalone door, not only does the door control this access rights to that door, but thanks to the two-way communication, the door also writes data like the blacklist or the time and date stamp, and the lock's battery status as well. It writes all of that information back to the user's card. Now, the card then transmits this information back to the server or to the software via the online readers that are generally connected to controllers, but that receive this information from the cards whenever they're scanned on anywhere in the building. Okay, so I'm going to show you how SVN or data on card works. It is a movie clip, so I'm just going to ask you to please just turn up your volume. It is a little bit soft. In a conventional access control system, generally when we give access to a person or we issue him with a tag, The tag has got a number in it, which we call the UID. So this is a unique identifying number. Now, once the person has been granted access and has been added to the system, the unique identifying number will then be stored in the control unit. Okay. So when the person then goes and presents his badge or his tag to a reader that's connected to a controller, the controller will then verify whether the card number is the same as what is on the controller, and based on that and the access given to that user, it will allow them access to that area. Now, in using a data on card platform, we no longer send that information to the control unit. Instead, we write the user access plan straight to the card. So the user access card then becomes the data carrier for a system like this. So typically, we would write an access plan to the card with all of the doors that the user is allowed to access. Now, once we present this card to the lock, two things happen. All right, there's a two-way communication. So once I present my card to the lock will check my card to see if it is part of my access plan. So if it sees its profile on my card, it will then do another check to see whether I'm scheduled to have access at that date and time, and then it will grant me access. Now, at the same time, while that's happening, the reader is also writing information from itself to the card as well. So things like your time and date stamp that you've accessed that door, as well as the lock's battery status. Okay, so at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, fair enough. So I've gone to all of these standalone offline doors, and I've scanned my card on various access points. So on my card, there is a whole bunch of transactions and battery statuses for the locks that I've been given access to. So how do we then retrieve that data from the card itself? Typically, with a data on card solution, you are required to, however, have one or two or more online access control points. Now, these are generally a wall reader or a reader that's connected to a controller, and the controller is networked. So it has got a constant connection to the database or to the software. So when the user then presents his card at one of these online points, the same thing happens again. So the system will then check to see who the user is and whether the user has access to that access point. And at the same time, while doing that, it will also then go and retrieve the data off of the card. So all of the doors that I have visited throughout the day, and all of the battery statuses that I've collected, the online reader will then take that information off of my card, and it will make it available on the software. Okay, so let's take a look at how our data on card platform works live. Right, so I've created a user card. I've also given my user access to this padlock. So this is an electronic padlock, which is an offline standalone lock. It's in no way connected to a wireless network or any other type of a network. And you will see that it's offline in the software right below underneath this video. Should I scan on this door and it's actually online, live, I'll be able to see the transaction there. But with it being offline, as soon as I go and scan my card, I will then get access granted with a green light. And at the same time, while this lock has now granted me access, it's also written the time and date stamp back to my card, as well as this lock's battery status. Okay, I have another door here, which is my office door. So this door is also offline, and the same thing will apply here. So I go and scan on my door, the door has granted me access, and at the same time, once again, it's written the time and date stamp back to my card. Okay. Now, to retrieve this data from the card, we need to then pass an online access point. So this is typically a reader and controller, and you can find these access points at high traffic areas like boom gates, turnstiles, maybe a reception door that everybody passes through. Okay, so once I go and present my card to this online controller, I want you to watch the software right underneath for the transactions coming in. And you'll see once I scan it there. Right, so the first transaction, or from the bottom, you'll see is my padlocks transaction. The very next transaction will then be my offline office door. And then my third transaction is from my slimline in reader that I clocked at. Okay, so another really great feature about a data on card platform is the way we distribute lost or stolen cards or cancelled cards in the system throughout all of our standalone offline locks. Now, here I've got 3 user cards, John, Jim, and Jerry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we carry this blacklist from the system or from a live access point to all of our offline doors. Okay, so let's say, for instance, John has lost his card. Now, in the meantime, while this card has not been blacklisted or the lock has not received the blacklist, John is able to scan on this door and is able to get access, all right? Because it is a standalone lock, so it doesn't know that the card is lost yet. But let's say, for instance, Jim comes in to the online access point in the morning, right? So we scan his card. So what's happened now is Jim's card has actually gone and picked up the blacklist, and that blacklisted card belongs to John, all right? So what Jim is now going to do is he's going to go to the offline office door, right? So when Jim goes and scans his card over here, he gets access, and at the same time, he's downloading the blacklist to the lock as well, all right? Now, let's say Jim never gets to the padlock. So Jim then goes off site, and then Jerry comes along. So Jerry has also not passed the online access point, but even though he hasn't passed that point, the blacklist is still sitting on the offline office door. So once Jerry then goes and scans on the offline office door, he picks up the blacklist on his card. And when he goes and scans it on the padlock, he will then download it on the padlock. So there we go and scan on our padlock. Right, so should John's card ever show up, let's say somebody picks it up, it was found again, and somebody tries to use that card at the padlock where John had access before, it will then deny him access. Okay, so what happens is the lock will actually erase the access control plan that is sitting on John's card. Okay, so another really unique feature of a standalone system is the ability to grant access to users and not having to bring their cards back to the system operator. Okay, so like I said, the access plan is written on the card. So basically all we need to do is update the access plan. And this we can do at any online point. So to give you an example, this padlock, my user Jim, when he scans on the padlock, you'll see that he doesn't have access to this padlock. When he also goes and scans on the offline office door, there's no access given to him because he doesn't have the rights to go into those doors. Now, for a data on card system, basically all that they need to do is phone the operator or speak to the operator that is administering the software, ask them to give them additional access to the doors that they need, and then all the user needs to do is go to his closest or nearest online update point, scan his card, and then you'll be able to have access to those doors. So just to show you how that works, I'm going to take my card now, scan it at an online point so that I can update the access plan on my card. So once I've scanned it, it's now updated the access plan on my card. And if Jim now goes and tries to scan on the padlock where he didn't have access before, you'll see that his access is now granted. Okay, the same applies for our offline door. When I go and scan on the door, immediately Jim will have access to those additional access points. So that basically is a data on card system in a nutshell.
Okay, so I hope that explanation of your data on card platform was sufficient, and you guys have an idea of how we transfer the data by using the user's card instead of a network. So this is just one of the other advantages of going with a wireless system. Because remember, at the end of the day, if we talk about wireless, we say that these locks are actually online and they're connected. But in the event of a network failure and these access points can no longer see the doors will then automatically write this data to the user card itself. So there's no need to update the user card or the lock itself. All these transactions will be written to the user card, and when they pass, when the network comes back online again and they pass an online network point,
they can scan their card there to retrieve all of this information. Okay, so we're going to get back to our 8 fundamental questions that you need to ask before scoping or preparing an access control system for a business. Okay, and the first question that we went through was, what are the benefits and is it worth it? So, you know, while these electronic systems provide a lot of benefits over the keys, they are going to cost thousands more per door than a normal key in a lock. So as such, you may then determine that the cost of an electronic system cannot be justified, or that only certain doors are worth installing access control on. So once again, what do you secure? Okay, 9 out of 10 times, like I said, the perimeter is the most important and is the first line of defense against any unauthorized access or controlling any external threats on any given site. Now, often more focus is given to these access points, as well as increased resources. For instance, if you have, and this is more for stricter control, so the addition of turnstiles and spike barriers, number plate recognition, CCTV, and all of these things can be added to access control points, and it's just another way to increase the security for places like this. Okay. Now, once these measures have been passed, the site is generally open to all, and you have freedom to move around within the site. So once the site security has been taken care of, you will also then need to mitigate the level of risk for each internal area and the value of what you're trying to protect within that site. And these can be things like storage, equipment, money, sensitive data. And then you also need to take into account compliance to health and safety regulations for areas that might, for instance, be hazardous to health and things. Okay, so you can see from my slide over there, you know, I've got a couple of access points in there that have different security levels. So for instance, your server room, and typically this is a sensitive area which is normally out of bounds to employees, but can contain very expensive IT equipment. So this would be a high level or a high risk area. Lift control. So what's nice about lift control is we can now use the lift control as well to secure certain floors that may be sensitive or more critical than others. And then right underneath that, obviously personal security. I've mentioned this just now, that you need to ensure your employer and employee well-being and security at all times. And this is generally also one of the reasons why people put access controls into buildings, especially in our country where we've got a bit of an issue with it. So that is also another factor to take into account. Then you'll see at the top right-hand side, we've got our staff offices. Now, I've put a low risk on this. Generally, you know, a staff person's office only might contain a computer or a laptop, and all the rest of the things inside that office of value might be personal items. Okay. Your boardrooms, so in most institutions, they've got very expensive audiovisual equipment, polycoms for voice over IP and things like that. And then there's also often sensitive data. You might not think of it this way, but you know, when you have a meeting, there is sometimes sensitive data that you might write on the whiteboard or things like that. And those areas are generally access control as well. A storeroom, definitely a high-risk area. They normally contain high-value items or personal data or company information that is very sensitive. Then right underneath that, we've got our emergency exits. Now, emergency exits are normally unidirectional. Okay, so you can only go out. That's what the exits are for. So can this door be operated from the outside as well? Because with the wireless solutions that are available today, you can actually put a half an escutcheon on the outside of that fire door, making that door an access control door as opposed to just an emergency exit. Now, with the addition of that escutcheon, you can also then monitor the door state wirelessly as well, which is really nice. I mean, if you've got an alarm system in a building that you normally switch on every day, you would need to ensure that all of your perimeter doors are closed before you can do that. Now, typically these fire doors are pretty much standalone devices and nobody really worries about them because nobody uses them. But adding in half the escutcheon to the outside of the door, you can then make this door wireless and online in real time as well. Okay. And then right underneath that, your electrical service panels or cabinets. Okay, so I should have probably made this also a high risk. You know, these panels obviously, well, they often contain the power, TV boards and things like that for a business. And for most businesses, it is critical to have electricity network most of the time. So yeah, you could also control these cabinets, however, with electronic geo cylinders and things like that that are also wireless. So you can monitor real-time events from these cabinets. Okay, so your forms of authentication. So there are many forms of credentials that you can use in an access control scenario. And there's a huge range of technologies also to choose from. So some of the credentials are more secure than others. And they have different data capacity sizes for multiple applications. So for instance, if you're not just using it for your building's access control, but you have a canteen as well, and you would like to use that card for a type of a money wallet application, there's enough space on those cards for that as well. So, I mean, you know, looking at the screen here, here's just a few different versions of types of credentials that you can use. So there's things like your smart cards or your credit card type credential. That's probably the most common in today's world. And you get them in different technologies, different sizes and things. And then right underneath that, you can also use key fobs. And then underneath that, we've got bracelets. So those are silicon rubber bracelets, which are 100% waterproof. We've also got little straps with tags that you can put around your arms like a little bracelet. And these are generally classified under the wearables. So with the readers now being able to communicate via Bluetooth and NFC, the smartphone and the smart watch has now become your key that most people aren't likely to lose or leave lying around or forget at home. Okay, so and also with those types of technologies, you eliminate that recurring cost of tags and cards and things like that. You know, for people to lose a card, it's not a major issue. They'll come back, they'll say, you know, I genuinely lost my card. That's okay, we'll issue you a new card. But at the end of the day, those cards are anything between 30 and 50 Rand a card, depending on the type of technology. So that is a recurring cost that you completely eliminate when you go for a mobile route where they use their mobile device as their key. Okay, so one of the other questions in our 8 fundamentals was authentication. So authentication is very important, and there are different modes to consider. So there are single modes of authentication, and then there are multiple modes to consider. So for instance, in a general area or an office with low security risks, it will only require one mode of authentication. where other areas could require maybe 2 or even 3 different credentials to be presented before access is granted to an area or a door. So generally these credentials can be categorized as follows. So the first category we have there is something you have, right? So this could be a normal credit card type credential, or a key fob, a mobile device, or a smartwatch. Okay, then it's something that you are. So this can either be a biometric template from a fingerprint reader, or this can be a facial template from a facial recognition scanner. And then something you know. So this can be it's typically a PIN code or a combination code, something like that. And in combination, these credentials need to be presented in a sequence altogether for a successful authentication. And this is known as your multiple mode authentication solutions. Okay. So in that multi-factor there, I've got an example of either your card and a PIN, or your mobile device and a biometric template, or a PIN code and a key fob. And this is all to make that access control point a little bit more secure. Okay. Okay, so then the question comes up, what kind of a reader should you use? And all depending on the environment where the reader will be installed, you will need to make sure that it can withstand the elements, and also as well as being compliant with any security or health and safety regulations as well. So obviously everybody knows with the current pandemic, more focus has been put on a contactless reader type of a solution that doesn't require the user to touch any surface that might be contaminated by a previous user, you know, such as like a hand punch, which is a very old terminal that requires you to insert your whole hand, or a biometric terminal, okay, which can also contain germs and viruses from the previous user. Okay, so you'll see in the examples that I have here on the slide, we have sliding doors, we've got boom gates, lift control, and turnstiles. Okay, so generally these types of access points require a relay or a contact to be sent to the control module of the motor to trigger a solenoid or to action the motor. Okay, so 9 out of 10 times this will be a hardwired reader and controller solution. Okay, so I mean predominantly we're a wireless, wire-free access control company, but we do have these wired solutions. There is just, in some instances, there is just no way to get away from this kind of a solution when you're looking at wiring a boom gate or a turnstile or something like that. Okay, so to the right of that, we have our common hinged doors. So this can either be an entrance or an internal door, or an office door, and will be driven by the escutcheon or the handle to engage a mortise lock that actually sits inside the door, retracting the latch and the deadbolt. Okay, so this deadbolt and the latch latch into the door frame itself. So this is just a standard way that any other door works that you find today. So basically that is showing you that you can take an electronic wireless escutcheon, and even if you want to use the existing lock that's still inside the door, you can use the existing lock, and you basically just put this handle onto the door to have that door access control. Okay. So you'll see as well, we've got a fire door there. So in many cases, they are unidirectional. It's an exit door, and you're not able to access the door from the outside. So I did mention this a little bit earlier on, with the addition of a wireless online half escutcheon on the outside of the door, you can now use this door as an entry point as well for your maintenance staff or emergency personnel. And another advantage of adding this, the wireless capabilities to an existing emergency exit, is that you can now also monitor this door state wirelessly as well. And you know, often these doors are overlooked and are assumed to be closed, but in some cases they aren't, and they leave a huge gap in the security of a building. So these solutions can be fitted to probably about 90% of existing fire or emergency exit doors that exist today, with the escutcheon and the mortise in a retrofit scenario. So both the escutcheon sitting on the outside and the mortise lock that goes in the door are also fire rated as well. So it's emergency exit door, and those doors are normally fire rated. So it would only make sense that the hardware that you put on the door needs a fire rating as well. Okay. Right, so looking at our last example here at the bottom, This is a typical mortise cylinder kind of a lock, and you find these a lot in SA, especially on your aluminium doors. You'll have these kind of locks. So we have many of these locks in SA, and securing things like security gates and trolley doors and garage doors and sliding gates. And here I'm specifically talking about the cylinder inside the door. We've even got them on electronic key switches for roller shutter doors. Okay, this is just to name a few. So these doors are very easy to secure with a wireless online solution, as the only thing you need to do for a door like that is to remove the existing cylinder and just replace it with an electronic cylinder. So the examples I have here are for your standard cylinder and key type of a door. So this can either be replaced with an escutcheon handle, that's probably the easiest, or actually the cylinder would be the easiest, or you can just remove the cylinder itself and pop in a new cylinder. Okay, so and in a case like that, where you just remove the cylinder and put an electronic cylinder in, the handle still will stay as it is on that door. Okay, and then I also have an example to the right of that. So that is your common server racks. And they are normally secured with keys. Okay, so same thing applies depending on what profile it is, and these electronic locks they can come in different profiles, whether it's oval, UK, Scandinavian, European. So all that you do is simply slip out the cylinder out of the handle and slip in the electronic cylinder. So what's nice about that is, and especially in a hosted environment where you've got all of these different types of, all these different servers belonging to different companies, the technicians would obviously go there to service those servers and things. And instead of now giving them access to the whole data center, you're able to give them access to a specific server rack to ensure the security of those servers. Okay, so like I said, the cylinders come in many different shapes and forms. You can get a whole range of them, but they're really versatile in all the applications that you can apply these locks to. Okay, right. So what kind of a lock should I use? So previously, I also referred to, when I was speaking of these 8 fundamental questions, I said that, you know, when they refer to the lock here, they're talking about the locking mechanism that is keeping the door closed. Okay, so once again, this is all dependent on the door and the area that you are installing it in, and the security level needed per access location, as you may also need a mix of different solutions to mitigate that risk factor. Now, there are various types of locks that range in security level, as well as different fire and safety ratings. Now, for the access points that require a contact or a relay to open, we generally don't need a lock for that, but we rather send this to the motor controller itself. But for doors like main reception doors and entrance doors and things like that, that you're not able to fix a handle to, you will be required to install a magnetic lock or an electric strike lock or an electric deadbolt. Now, often these are powered by external power sources. So for internal doors like office doors and fire doors, and basically any standard type of an operating door, you do require a mortise lock inside that door that latches to the door frame to keep the door secure. So just keep in mind as well, like I said earlier on, you don't have to replace the lock inside, or the mortise lock inside the door. These wireless solutions fit to many of these locks that are currently in circulation in today. Right, then you also see this mortise lock, this example that I have here. So in the previous slide, we said that we are able to either take off this handle and fit it with something like an escutcheon. But if you want to go to the geocylinder route, I mean, it's as easy as removing the cylinder, and the cylinder will be inserted here, so that when you scan on this door lock and you turn the cylinder, it retracts the deadbolt and the latch. Okay. Right. So what do you need at the door besides the reader and the lock? Now, we went through a couple of examples of the different elements that you need to secure a door, other than the reader and the lock. Okay, and this will all be dependent on the solution that you decide to go with. So obviously some solutions require less hardware than others to achieve the same level of security. Okay, so, and then also the next question is, how do you connect a reader to the network? So typically the reader, there's two options here. So the reader is either wired to a controller or the lock is wireless and it's communicating wirelessly with its access point that is connected to a network. So the wireless options available are typically wire-free and work on a wireless RF or Bluetooth communication signal. That is to the access point that resides on your network that manages the communication to the database or the software from the lock. Okay, so what type of access control management systems should you use, local or cloud-based? So with the locals, look, there are benefits to both options with cost, installation time, architecture requirements, your power and network infrastructure limitations, and all of these things you need to consider. And another thing you need to consider is also the size of the organization and the amount of doors that you want to secure, as well as the level that you're trying to achieve. So a lot of time, you know, with a server-based solution or an on-premise solution, you are required to have a license for these systems. So the license would allow you a certain amount of users on that system. You would then need to go and expand the license. And very often on a wired solution where you have a wired controller, these controllers also have a limitation to the amount of people whose credentials can be stored on those controllers. So typically with a wireless system, you don't have those limitations because the lock itself on the door or the handle doesn't actually store the user information on the lock, because we're using the data on card platform with these systems. So each and every person's access plan is written to his card. The lock doesn't save any of that information on the lock itself. So because of that, you can have a total of 4 million users going through a lock. There's no real limitation to the amount of users you can have per lock. So with a cloud-based solution, also something to keep in mind that that a cloud-based solution normally requires you to have it's normally a per user license kind of a scenario. So when you're looking at buildings, big buildings that have many doors and many people, you know, when you weigh up the costs, it's just not going to make sense to go to something cloud-based. You would rather then look at an on-premise solution, an on-premise wireless solution for something like that. Okay, so with these wireless locks, there is also an ability to, well, with our current situation that we have, it also allows you to coat these wireless access points and even some of the plastic wall readers, gym lockers, things like that, where you normally find, or that's normally in a kind of a germy environment. These locks are also, you can also coat them in an antimicrobial technology that helps reduce the microbes on the product surface and improves the hygiene in these environments. So this technology is, it delivers a 99.9% 24/7 protection against an array of microbes, including your influenza, H1N1, E. coli, Salmonella, MRSA, and then also a feline strain of the coronavirus. Okay, so it doesn't kill the coronavirus, but there's a feline strain of it that it does manage. Okay, so this is a lifelong coating. that gets applied to the surface, and it stays there. And obviously, when you grab the handle or something like that, when you put your handle on it, any point of contact where you've had with the handle, it will kill the germs on that handle, so that when the next person comes past and grabs the same handle again, that they don't cross-infect or carry the virus or whatever the case is. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to the questions and answer session now. I encourage you to ask questions in the questions panel. Roger, we have 2 questions at the moment from Pendulo Shabangu. He's asking, what are the range of cards technology the reader can support, e.g. MyFair, HID, etc.?
Okay, Pendulu, we support the whole MyFair family range. So anything MyFair, DesFire, EV1, EV2, CIOS, HID, we support the whole MyFair family across our platform.
Thank you, Roger. And his second question is the wireless system integratable with other systems like Impro, Honeywell, and Gallagher?
No, it isn't. The wireless system itself is not integrated, but we do have an integration module for some of these companies like Gallagher. They've written a full integration into SALTO that will actually allow you to use the wireless devices connected to their controller, and all of the decisions made based on the user's access will be made by the Gallagher system. So those integrations do already exist, and we do integrate to a number of companies, or they do integrate to us on the access control platform.
Thank you. Roger, we don't have any questions. If you like, I will continue with our webinar.
Yes, thank you.
We have another question here, sorry, from Offensi Noah. He's asking, can your access cards integrate into devices like Fitbit, etc., so you can activate turnstiles with an authorized Fitbit, for example?
No, so we're only limited to the watches themselves, and the reason for this is because those devices can't take the type of a credential that we send. So it needs to be either an iOS platform or an Android platform. So any device that's able to do that, you know, like a smartwatch, will be able to be used with access control.
Thank you, Roger.
All right, so I've reached the end of the presentation. It's actually gone a little bit quicker than what I thought. So I'd like to ask you if there is maybe something that you might have thought of afterwards, and you would like to send us a question on that, or would like information of any of the other solutions that we've gone through. You guys can email us directly at info.za@saltosystems.com. Alternatively, you can go to our website at www.saltosystems.com. There's a wealth of information on our whole product range and the wireless data on card platforms. You can also then go to navigate to a site which is called mylock.saltosystems.com, and in that you can actually go and design a door. So if you're looking at controlling a door with wireless technology, you can go and select the door, the beveling, the color, everything you need for that door, and choose an access control device that you can add to it, so that you can actually see how that will look once it's installed on that door. Okay, very handy tool. Okay, so that is all for me, and with that I'm going to end this webinar session. So thank you very much everybody for joining. Enjoy your weekend, and as always, stay safe. Right, good day everyone, and
thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. Roger, thank you for availing yourself for this webinar. Please watch out. Next month, SALTO will offer 2 half-day workshops that will be CPD validated to the SAIEE members. So please watch this space. Roger, thank you for joining us. Attendees, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful evening further. Goodbye.